Casting is obviously one of the most important aspects to ensuring that a movie turns out the way the writer wants it to. Because what comes naturally to one actor may be the hardest thing in the world to another, and not to mention some have a much more limited range than others. So as a result, it's very important that the right kind of actor is cast in any given role, to the point that it's even been given its own category at the Academy Awards. That's how significant it really is. But that being said, that doesn't mean casting directors always get it right, as there have been many times where actors were infamously cast in roles that they obviously weren't meant for. And in many of those cases, the results were nothing short of disastrous. But at the same time, there have also been just as many times where an unlikely actor was cast in a role and absolutely killed it against all odds. But rather than focusing on actors who were either unexpectedly great or flopped as hard as everyone thought they would, today I would like to go over a questionable casting choice that's left many debating for years over whether or not the actor in question was miscast or surprisingly brilliant in the part. And there will be spoilers for the movie in question ahead, so if you don't want to know how it ends, you should remain on the lookout. This will be your one and only warning. Okay, so obviously there are many casting choices throughout cinema history that have sparked debates similar to the one I just described. But the one I'm referring to may just be one of the most famous among them, with that being Gregory Peck's casting as Captain Ahab in the 1956 version of Moby Dick. Because while on the whole, the movie is considered excellent and one of the best adaptations of the classic novel ever, the decision to have Peck play the lead is a lot more divisive. And it's easy to see why, considering Gregory Peck was a rather subdued actor overall, who was more well known for playing a calm everyman, so he wouldn't be most people's first choice for a character as plagued by revenge and insanity as Captain Ahab. But despite that, he doesn't actually do that bad in the part. Now I'd just like to quickly point out that I am by no means an expert here and can only give my own personal opinion on this, so please feel free to take or leave what I'm about to say as you wish. But I honestly do believe he could have been a lot worse. I mean, Peck's calm acting style does suit Ahab well as a man who just doesn't care about anything except getting that blasted whale anymore, as well as help hide the true extent of his insanity behind that seemingly gentlemanlike demeanor. And even when it is time for him to show his madness, he does do his job of convincing the viewer that he is indeed crazy. To put it simply, if nothing else, Peck does play the part competently, and more or less gets everything across to the viewer that he needs to. As I already said, his portrayal here could have been way worse, because at least what he does, for the most part, fits the character. But that being said, was he the best choice for the role? No, absolutely not. Because while Peck's performance may be serviceable, as I just got through saying, he's never really able to capture the hidden layers of insanity that drive Ahab and everybody else to their doom. To put it another way, and for a comparison, there's a reason Marlon Brando's performance as Colonel Kurtz is considered one of the best he ever gave. Because Brando not only has you believing he's insane, but shows it with every little facial expression, every line of dialogue, and even every move he makes. This is a man totally broken by war, and Brando goes to lengths most actors could only dream of to make sure the audience knows it, even if he never once totally loses his cool. But he doesn't need to for the audience to understand just how crazy he is, because Brando's able to do all of that just by sitting there and talking. Even his stare alone tells you everything you need to know about his mindset. And if a character like Kurtz is to be done justice, then he needed to be played by an actor of Brando's caliber and talents, because a lesser actor would have never been able to convey all of that. But I went into more depth on Brando and Kurtz in my video on Apocalypse Now, which you can find a link in the description to if you want to explore this topic further. But by now you might be wondering, what's my point with this? That Captain Ahab is very similar to Colonel Kurtz in a lot of ways, particularly in how they're both characters plagued by insanity. Ahab's not an out-and-out villain like many believe, but he's also not a good person either. Instead, he was once a great man whose mind was broken after being attacked by Moby Dick and losing his leg to him. And as a result, in his madness, all he can concentrate on is finding the whale and killing him in retribution for what he did, and is going to accomplish that goal no matter what it takes. He's a man so consumed by revenge that everything else takes a back seat to it, and nothing will ever convince him to abandon his quest. Though that doesn't mean he's incapable of thinking clearly either, as he does feel regret on a few occasions, or even briefly considers abandoning his quest, showing that he is still capable of humanity. It's just that none of it is ever able to get him to let go of his lust for revenge, and in the end, he fully embraces it, outright saying he accepts it'll send him to hell as long as it brings Moby Dick with him. To put it simply, there's a reason Ahab is the poster child for somebody with a single-minded obsession, and how his story is the ultimate cautionary tale of not knowing when to let go of something. And the thing is, Peck is hardly able to capture any of that. He just wasn't that kind of actor. And like I said before, as a result, he's really only able to do the bare minimum to make the character work. But one just can't help but feel that there was so much potential lost because of Peck's performance. Because as I already noted, Ahab should have been portrayed by somebody who could have shown his madness with every little gesture and spoken line, which would only serve to make the few times he does go completely insane all the more horrifying to see, because it would only reinforce not just how far gone he really is, but also how tortured an existence he leads as well. And Peck just isn't able to do that. His performance is like a fast food burger, which is fine on its own, but wouldn't be seen as up to snuff in a gourmet restaurant. He just wasn't capable of tapping into the endless well of vengeance and despair that is Ahab's mindset, and instead offers only a very basic version of the character. And honestly, if I had to pick an actor from that era who I think would have been perfect for the role of Ahab, it would have to be Orson Welles. Because Welles just had a way of conveying so much about a character and what they were thinking, even when he had very little to work with. And I believe his master of subtlety as well as his ability to go very over the top when the situation calls for it, would have suited a character like Ahab perfectly, and much better than Gregory Peck's approach. He could have easily displayed the many sides of Ahab and truly conveyed the endless layers of torture and vengeance that embodies him. Though, ironically, Orson Welles actually is in the movie, but in the smaller role as a priest. Still, his sermon is probably one of the best scenes in the film, in a further testament to his abilities, and perfectly demonstrates my point. But to be fair, even Gregory Peck felt he was miscast as Ahab, and famously did everything he could to try and bury the film out of embarrassment. And to add insult to injury, he was only cast for his star power, because John Huston, the movie's writer and director, had wanted to make an adaptation of Moby Dick for years. It was basically his passion project. But the studio was very nervous about going ahead with it, since they felt it would be a tough sell on audiences, and thus wanted Huston to cast somebody very well known and famous in the lead. So Huston set his sights on Peck, convincing him that he was his one and only choice for the role of Ahab, and that he'd be absolutely perfect in it despite the actor's doubts, and was ultimately able to convince him to take the part. Though, of course, Huston only told him that so the movie would get made, as he couldn't find too many other stars interested in the role, and had he had his way, would have cast somebody else. And needless to say, Peck wasn't too happy when he found out the real reason Huston wanted to cast him so badly, which probably contributed to his feelings of embarrassment regarding his performance later on. But no matter the reason why he was cast, the point still remains that the casting itself still stands as one of the most controversial and talked about in the entire history of Hollywood, because some believe that Peck was actually perfect in the role, while others think he was completely miscast and even dragged down the rest of the film. Now, obviously, which camp you fall into will vary from person to person, but as I said before, I personally believe that while Peck was better in the role than he had any right to be, he still wasn't the ideal Ahab, and particularly has problems conveying the more complex aspects of the character. You don't have to agree with me on that, but that's how I personally feel. So again, his performance wasn't bad, but it wasn't great either, and the role probably would have been better suited for somebody else. Though the very fact that this is such a debated topic only goes to show that sometimes casting isn't as easy as it seems, and how such odd casting choices can inspire such varied and mixed reactions depending on the actor and role. Alright, I think that's everything I had to say on that. So now why don't all of you tell me? Do you believe that Gregory Peck was miscast as Captain Ahab in Moby Dick, or not? And do you believe his casting deserves to be so controversial and divisive? However you feel, please let me know in the comments below. And as I noted at the beginning, you don't have to agree with me on anything I said or any opinions I expressed in this video if you don't want to. You are entitled to your own opinion and can feel about Gregory Peck's performance however you'd like, and I nor anybody else can tell you you're wrong. And thank you all for watching. I really appreciate all of it, and I hope to see you all next time.